next presenter. Please put your hands together. Here to present today, Economic Instruments for Energy Efficient Buildings. Ladies and gentlemen, financing consultant of BSEEP, Mr. Miroslav Lesjak. Over to you.
Good day to you all. My name is Miroslav Lesjak, and this is my second closing conference of the energy efficiency in buildings project. I've been on several projects before, and I'm very glad to notice that over the years I'm progressing to bigger venues and bigger crowds. So today I'll be talking about energy efficiency financing instruments, and I will give you the regular story. What was there before the BSEEP came, what was done during the BSEEP's tenure, and what are the next steps and what is still there to be done. So, thank you. So the starting point or barriers for energy efficiency were more or less covered from different aspects. Now we're going to see actual financial impacts on the financing of energy efficiency. As we all know, energy efficiency is basically a cost-negative approach to CO2 abatement, but in real life, it's underperforming. There are several reasons for that. First, there's a high upfront cost for energy efficiency. In layman's terms, chillers cost money. There's a low priority of energy efficiency compared to competing investments, especially for the business. Translated into regular day-to-day terms, if we are doing our core business, it is unlikely that we are going to invest into something that is not our core business if we don't believe or we don't understand how it can benefit us over time or how it can improve our production. As the result, there is a lack of dedicated project financing for energy efficiency. And this is still a more or less reality here in Malaysia. To be fair, implementation of energy efficiency projects is a fairly complex process with a lot of market players that need to come together for this process to be successfully completed. Because everything starts with an idea. A building owner might, for the entire process to start, the building owner has to have the idea of improving energy efficiency himself, or it has to be approached by an ESCO, an energy auditor, to present such an idea. Then we need to quantify that idea, and we are doing that through the preliminary study and the detailed investment. Then the projects that qualify via their return on investment and other criteria, they're being evaluated. They have to be bankable, so there has to be a viable business case behind them. After that, we have the project implementation, and only after that we can realize energy savings. So it is a process with many stakeholders and a lot of barriers that needs to be overtaken, and the market has to have the capacity to facilitate that kind of a process. And this was already mentioned, but I need to reiterate the same thing. So energy efficiency, in order to scale up, it has to be a viable business case. And usually, it is a process that has two components. The first component is regulation ramp up and subsequent increase of the electricity or energy tariffs. That process is prerequisite for us to evolve from incentives and public finance, that is the budget that we are using, the government's budget or cities or states budget that we are using to finance our retrofits. And what we want to do is parallel with the improvement of our regulation, we want to move towards the private sector finance, because in in the process of increasing the energy price and regulation ramp up, we are creating a business case for energy efficiency. So the business takes over the drive for energy efficiency project implementation. So what's the big idea behind it? How do we facilitate the implementation of energy efficiency projects, and how do we incentivize, and how do we make a business case for energy efficiency? This is a long definition, but it's basically simple, and it comes down to two things. We need to have a coordinated approach between policy and financial instruments with a clearly defined goal, which is the near zero energy buildings, and it all has to be backed up by a reporting through strong data on the actual consumption of energy, and it has to be enforced from the side of the government. And by that, combining all that elements, we will achieve two things. First one is the creation of the market critical mass for adoption of Building EE. So as the market grows, the prices of energy efficient materials, products, and services go down. And that's been a proven concept over the years in the countries that have gone further in energy efficiency, such as Europe and the US. And the main lesson for energy efficiency financing, there is never enough money from the budget to drive energy efficiency forward. From the budgetary perspective, you can only scrape the surface of the problem. You can never solve the problem only with budgetary funds. But some things can be done. Leveraged financing is a must, because we need to, if we have a limited budget to influence the drive of energy efficiency, we must use it wisely in an efficient, financially efficient manner, in a way that we are using the market and using our budget only to steer the market forward. So for 1 ringgit of, if you have a budget of 100 ringgit and you invest it directly into the retrofit of your building, your leverage is 1. Because with 100 ringgit of your budget, you have addressed 100 ringgit of the total investment. On the other hand, if you are using leveraged financial products, such as we are piloting with MDV, your leverage can go from 17 to 20 to even higher numbers. That's how with a limited budget, let's say of 100 ringgit, you can address 1,700 ringgit of investment at the end. So leverage financing is a must, because the main lesson from energy efficiency financing around the world, there is never enough money in the budget to drive the energy efficiency market forward. So by knowing that, we combined two things. We have identified the main categories where energy is consumed in buildings. And for that main categories, we have combined a synergistic approach between the policy and the economic instruments, with a goal to decouple energy use from the building sector from the GDP growth. And this is the ultimate result that we want to achieve. This has been done. Let's say California is a prime example. They have started in the early 70s, in 20th century. And now their GDP is completely decoupled from the their energy consumption is decoupled both from GDP growth and both from the increase of the building stock. So this is the result we want to achieve by combining policy and economic instruments. To do so, we have designed several financing and incentive schemes. On-bill financing and dedicated EPC credit line are sustainable, commercially operated energy efficiency project financing mechanisms. I will start with on-bill financing, which is a principle where the investment for improving energy efficiency through retrofits is repaid from the reduction of the electricity bill. It is basically a energy efficiency incentive driven by the utilities. This model is very common in the states that have utility obligations of some kind. So demand-side management, there's a demand-side management obligation for the utilities, and the utilities have to offer some kind of energy efficiency product. What that does is, let's say you are a building owner that has an electricity cost of 100 ringgit per month. And in comes the TNB or some other utility and offers you a chiller retrofit. And they offer you a chiller retrofit with zero down payment from your side, which means that after the retrofit, after the chiller has been replaced for a more efficient one, your electricity bill is now 70 ringgit per month. You have an extra line on your utility bill that's used for paying up the financing in the actual chiller replacement, which is 20 ringgit. And combined, you saved 10 ringgit every month. So this is one of the ways a very wide market can be approached through a known by a known party that they have a relationship with. That's the TM, that's the utility company. So that's one of the ways a market can be transformed here in Malaysia, and that's how market was transformed in California and many other states around the world. This principle can be applied both for commercial and for residential sector. So we have designed on-bill financing principle for commercial and for residential sector. EPC credit line that we have talked about is a 50 million or USD or 200 million ringgit EPC project financing facility. It's operated by Malaysia Debt Ventures, and it is designed to provide ESCOs with a source of financing, with a source of project financing. So when we first started to look into ESCO business, the main issues that the projects aren't happening is because small and medium enterprise, which basically covers majority of the ESCOs in Malaysia, couldn't get financing for projects. If they got a very good project, they would use the standard asset-based lending from commercial banks, which required a deposit or a collateral, a hard collateral from their side. And with the project financing, your collateral is your project. So if you are going to replace a chiller, the actual project, the investment grade audit and the business case with it is your proof or your collateral that the project will succeed. So the idea is to use the existing commercial bank loan or development bank loan in this case, and use the budget money. This is the 500,000 USD or 2 million ringgit from BSEEP, and decrease the cost of financing for the ESCOs, enable small and medium ESCOs to access that financing for their projects, and therefore, with 1 ringgit of our budget money, this is the 2 million, we can address 17 times more investment into energy efficiency. And that's our leverage factor that we want to pilot for the government to subsequently use the budget money in that way. So the government also stepped in to the scheme, and they have offered an interest rate buy down of 1% that will additionally lower the cost of financing for ESCOs and will additionally enable more ESCOs to participate from the scheme. What we want to do here through this exercise, not only to target ESCOs, but if we wanted of EPC market of ESCO or energy efficiency market to scale up in Malaysia, we want to include other financial institutions in that process, which means that for commercial banks to step into this process, they need to have a statistics on how do energy performance contracts perform in Malaysia. What are the default rates? So they can structure their products accordingly. So with this MDV's scheme, we want to demonstrate two things. One is leveraged financing, so that's efficient use of government's limited funds and how to drive the energy efficiency market forward with it. And the second one is we want to establish a track record for EPC in Malaysia to enable other financial institutions to come in and to scale up the market. You will hear more about the actual credit line after this presentation because MDV is right after me. So, other part of the economic instruments we have designed in several years now are focused on filling the pipeline with projects. So basically what we want to do, we have devised also an energy audit incentive scheme which coincides with the RMK11 funds that have been announced in 2016. And what we want to do, because of the fairly complex process of the EPC project implementation, we must act in with all the market players. So it's not enough that we provide only the financing part, which is the right side of the funnel, but we also need to fill the pipeline with bankable projects. So with a limited budget that is available in Malaysia, we also need to focus on preparing the quality investment grade audits and building the capacity of the local technical community, ESCOs, auditors, to have the people available in Malaysia that can perform energy audits and that can fill the pipeline for the banks to subsequently finance. And this is only a small exercise on how much money it would take for the government to provide through incentives for energy audits over RMK 11 and 12 to be able to retrofit 4% of the commercial building sector each year. Marina also mentioned that in the decoupling scenario for the long-term plan. Why 4%? Because if we mandate 4% of the commercial building stock that has to be retrofitted each year, in a building lifetime, each building gets retrofitted once. So, in order to address 4% of the total commercial sector, we would need in RMK 11 122 million ringgit just to build up the capacity of the auditors to fill the pipeline with the bankable projects. In this calculation, we have considered some other things that we start, let's say, with the 80% of the subsidy, and through time we come down to 40% of the subsidy of the total cost of the audit. And through time, capacity of the local auditing community and local ESCO community goes up, and we have more bankable projects for less money. For that same exercise, we calculated the number of projects it would produce and the energy savings it would subsequently produce, and these are the numbers. And we are looking around 600 retrofit projects, 600 to 800 retrofit projects each year to complete that 4% exercise target. Another instrument that we have devised, and it is focused on, all the instruments we have talked about so far have been focused on existing commercial buildings. And one basically no-cost instrument, idea for a no-cost instrument is a gross floor area incentive scheme, which is a voluntary no-cost economic instrument that encourages private sector to develop top-tier energy efficient commercial and residential green buildings. What this scheme does is, and it is being successfully implemented in Singapore, producing more than 1,000 projects under the scheme to date. The idea is to allow developers to develop 5 to 10% more GFA above the gross plot ratio for top-tier energy efficient building, which would translate into platinum and gold rated buildings. So if your building is platinum, you can get up to 2,000 square foot of space at the same plot compared to the regular building, and that extra space would basically offset your extra cost in that developer needs to invest in the development process. And it's a beneficiary for both the local councils that are implementing, local governments that are implementing the scheme, and from the developers and for the environment in the entire lifetime of the building. This was the short overview of the economic instruments that were designed in the BSEEPs, through the BSEEP project. They have been implemented in the long-term policy and economic plan and presented to the government of Malaysia. And we have seen some very promising steps in the implementation of those instruments. Energy audits are subsidized in this process, and we have an MDV credit scheme. And the next steps, the main lesson from this process is there is no silver bullet that can address all the needs for EE financing. We have to have more multiple coordinated instruments at the same time. Why do we need to have more instruments? Because instruments, to be efficient, need to be specific. You cannot have the same instrument for different purposes, both for new and commercial buildings. It is proven that the more complex the financing instrument is, the less likely is to be taken up by the market. The second next step, or the second lesson learned from this process, is that there's a need to set up a policy and economic framework to deliver long-term targets for near-zero energy buildings as standard for Malaysia. We need to know what we are aiming for over a long period of time, so the building industry can prepare itself and steer itself accordingly. And by incentivizing this process, we are only when we have set the course in the process, with incentives, we only steer the market forward by incentivizing only the top performing technologies and the top performing services. Public funds have to be used in efficient and leveraged manner to address the investment need for driving the building sector towards sustainable energy scenarios. And I will repeat this because it is very important. Nowhere in the world has ever been enough budget money to drive the energy efficiency forward in the building sector. There is always a need for a private sector investors to come in, and we need to use the limited public resources very, very carefully. Why do we do that? Because we need to make energy efficiency a viable business case. Only with that we will see the shift towards from public to private financing, and we can free up our resources and focus with the government. We can free up the government resources and focus on the measurement and verification of the instrument implementation and building up of the government resources to handle energy efficiency for the future. That was all from my side. This was only the brief overview of the work that was done in the financing component with BSEEP. At the end, I'm really pleased that we have come together to realize that policy and economic instruments, and the government has done so, that policy and economic instruments have to go hand in hand, and there has to be a coordinated approach in Malaysia for the government, for the building sector, in order to reach the near zero energy building standard by 2040. Thank you very much.